My name is Nural Haith. I am one of the joint heads of the Forced Marriage Unit in the UK.
Good afternoon. My name is Jenny Horrocks. I'm the other joint head of the Forced Marriage Unit. The Forced Marriage Unit in the UK is a joint team between the Home Office and the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. And we lead on forced marriage casework, policy, and also prevention work and raising awareness of forced marriage. In 2020, we worked on roughly 750 cases of forced marriage. We're here to give advice primarily. So we run a public helpline and an inbox. We most commonly work either directly with victims or we receive calls from their colleagues, their friends, their family. And we also do a lot of work with police and social services and other professionals throughout the UK. If forced marriage victims are in the UK, we can help them regardless of their nationality. If people are overseas, we can help them if they're British or they're dual nationals. And this is where we can offer consular assistance. So we work with our colleagues in embassies all around the world to help with things like emergency travel documentation. But we also have funded partnerships with safe houses in some of our key countries. We most commonly work in South Asia, the Middle East and Central Africa, but we do work all over the world. So in 2020, we worked across 54 different countries, and in previous years, it's been even more than that.
The structural conditions which characterize our work is that the Forced Marriage Unit is jointly funded by both Home Office and Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. Bulk of the policy and related matters sit with our Home Office, which is equivalent of Ministry of Interior. So forced marriage has been illegal in the UK since 2014. So if convicted, you could face up to 7 years imprisonment. It is also illegal to deceive someone into going overseas to force them to get married. Forced marriage is on our national curriculum. So all school children are taught about it and there is good awareness of the law. We also have what is called forced marriage protection orders. These are UK court orders which are easy to obtain and do not require a lot of evidence. These are usually taken out by police for adults or social services for children. People who are trying to force someone to get married will face up to 5 years in prison if they break the terms of an order, which usually says you must not force this person to get married. It could also say you must not take them overseas without permission, or it could also say you must bring them back to the UK by such and such date. So our role is to support agencies applying for forced marriage protection orders. And our aim is to empower them and make them understand how easy it is to obtain the forced marriage protection orders and the effectiveness of these forced marriage protection orders. So currently the greatest challenges of our work has been obviously COVID. Since COVID restrictions came into force, the pandemic has affected many cases, but it is very difficult to tell with reduced travel and fewer weddings if fewer forced marriages have occurred or if people have had less chance to report them. We get a lot of referrals from schools, colleagues, friends who may not have seen victims. Also, the biggest challenge for us has been engaging directly with communities in an appropriate way. We are working with community leaders and non-government organizations to speak directly to the public, and we're always seeking out other avenues and forums to engage directly with the communities. We recently translated our publication called What is a Forced Marriage into 12 languages to make it more accessible to a wider range of communities. Well, the best wish for the future would be that we had 0 forced marriages and no victims were taken abroad for a forced marriage. That would be our best wish. However, all the work that we are doing. This is a continual process of development to ensure we are delivering the best service. We want to continue our very successful program of engagement and increasing the work with professionals and talking directly to communities. This is something that we really wish to do, and we are making great efforts to engage directly with the communities who are affected by forced marriages. We're always happy to talk to other countries and discuss ideas and learn from each other. And we would really welcome this opportunity to speak to you today. Our aim is always to have an effective prevention strategy to prevent cases of forced marriage and of reduced number of forced marriages taking place in the UK, as well as I said, no victims being taken overseas for the purpose of forced marriage.
Yeah, my name is Dini Vlierman, and I represent the Dutch Center of Forced Marriage and Abandonment. We are a knowledge and expertise center on forced marriage and abandonment. We have two target groups. We support two different groups of people that are possible victims of forced marriage and abandonment abroad, or those who have the risk of falling between two stools. And we support professionals in the Netherlands, mostly social professionals, working with the complex cases of forced marriage and abandonment. Yeah, we define, not only we, but in the Netherlands, forced marriage and abandonment is defined as a form of domestic violence and child abuse. To combat domestic violence and child abuse, the national government works together with 26 central municipalities for domestic violence and child abuse. Those municipalities are responsible for women's shelter, if necessary for men's shelter also, and they support and have and implement regional hubs of domestic violence and child abuse. We are part of the regional hub in the wider region of The Hague and part of the municipality of The Hague. We are the National Center of Forced Marriage and Abandonment, which means that all social professionals in the Netherlands can call us for advice, and all reports on forced marriage and abandonment abroad go to our center, and then we work together with partners in handling these cases. One of the biggest challenges is that the estimated number of victims of forced marriage and abandonment is much higher than the registered reports we have in the Netherlands. We have to strengthen the access of possible victims to help centers. That's very important. So that's a big challenge. Another challenge is when victims are abroad. Sometimes we see challenges in the local law there. Not in all countries women have access to legal aid or to be able to start a legal procedure. Sometimes we see that men can issue a travel ban on their wife or on their children to make it impossible for them to return to the Netherlands. So that's another big challenge that we have, and I think it's also important to work on. I already said that, but to work on the strengthening that possible victims really get access in the Netherlands to help centers. I think that's one of our biggest challenges. Well, the services we want to extend in a few years is our cooperation with organizations for people with a refugee or migrant background. It is important for us to lower the threshold for possible victims of forced marriage and abandonment to help centers. So we think that's very important, and to be able to talk about subjects like forced marriage and abandonment, and to talk about the difficulties parents sometimes find in bringing up a child in a country with different norms and values than they're possibly used to themselves. We think it's very important to raise awareness amongst victims that you can ask for help, that there's help ready for you, and that you don't necessarily have to leave the country, that it's still possible in many cases to talk with the parents and to get a solution and to have open conversations about that. We want to strengthen our cooperation with the police and the prosecution office in cases when it's very hard to be able to help a victim. And what we also think it's very important is to have more protective measures to prevent victims from being abandoned abroad or being forced to marry abroad, just because it's so difficult to reach out to these victims, because everything, like a passport, is taken away from them. They don't have access to a telephone. And all the contact with us has to be all secretive. So it often brings a lot of stress to victims. So we really want to emphasize the importance of protective measures from the Netherlands. And for ourselves, we think it's very important to do some research. Why, if there is a reason or what the reason is, or have more insight in which factors play a role in the abandonment of women who just came into the Netherlands on a living permit, like on a partner dependent living permit. So we sometimes see that often when they're just a few months in the Netherlands, they get abandoned abroad. So we really want to know more about the factors which are into play in these cases.
Mein Name ist Najwa Dostar und ich repräsentiere den Verein Orient Express in Wien. Als Verein betreiben wir unterschiedliche Fachbereiche. Einer unserer Arbeitsschwerpunkte ist das Thema Zwangsheirat und verwandtschaftsbasierte Geschlechtergewalt. Hier bieten wir unter anderem mehrsprachige Beratung und Betreuung für Frauen und Mädchen mit Migrationsgeschichte an. Wir betreiben zudem eine Koordinationsstelle gegen Verschleppung und Zwangsheirat und betreiben auch 2 Schutzeinrichtungen für betroffene Mädchen und Frauen. Als gemeinnütziger Verein liegen die kennzeichnenden strukturellen Rahmenbedingungen in unserem ganzheitlichen Zugang. Wir versuchen im Rahmen unserer politisch und konfessionell unabhängigen Position Frauen und Mädchen mit Migrationsgeschichte zu stärken und zu empowern. Die größten aktuellen Herausforderungen unserer Tätigkeit liegen unter anderem in unserer Finanzierungsstruktur. Wir sind sehr häufig von Projekttätigkeiten abhängig. Das bedeutet für uns einen höheren administrativen Aufwand und dementsprechend weniger Zeit für die inhaltliche Arbeit, aber auch für die Beratungs- und Betreuungsarbeit. Eine zweite aktuelle Herausforderung liegt definitiv in der Covid-19-Pandemie und der damit einhergehenden schlechteren oder schwierigeren Erreichbarkeit von jungen Frauen und Mädchen. Für die Zukunft wünschen wir uns eine stabilere, langfristige und nachhaltige Finanzierungsform. Wir wünschen uns aber natürlich auch weiterhin unsere Zielgruppe gut erreichen zu können, unabhängig von der aktuellen Situation. Und natürlich wünschen wir uns eine inhaltliche und fachliche Weiterentwicklung auf Basis von internationalen, aber auch nationalen Kooperationen und Vernetzungen.
I am Marijke Weewouders. I am the head of the Federal Unit on Gender-Based Violence at the Institute for Equality Between Women and Men. And the Institute for Equality Between Women and Men is a federal institute, a unit who is at one part the administrator of the government. So in that part, we are collecting data on forced marriages. We are making doc number services. We are making up the National Action Plan on Gender-Based Violence. which has a great deal on forced marriages as well. But we are also an equality body, and in this equality body, we are elaborating tools, sensitization tools towards care people, towards registers. And this is the last project. It's very useful. We had found out that registers are having an opportunity, having a legal basis in Belgium to protect and to deal with forced marriages. And but we found out that they don't know how to act upon, how to see the signs. They didn't know what forced marriages was. They didn't know what the differences between forced marriages and share marriages. They went to deal with share marriages, even though they were confronted with forced marriages. So we made a toolkit for them, how to see the sign, what to do, how to interview when you're seeing a victim or a perpetrator on forced marriages, how to deal with them, how to protect the victims, and what are to-dos and to-don'ts. So we made up a toolkit for the registers to deal with forced marriages, but also to recognize the signs of forced marriages and to see the differences between forced marriages and sham marriages. The focus on elaborating this tool, because it was a very big deal, because this is the focus on the project is we are forced in Belgium as well, like every other country. There's a great difference between the dark number, the real problem of forced marriages, the prevalence of forced marriages, and the low official data, the low data on police records, the low data on registers who are postponing forced marriages. So the real issue is here how to see the signs, to give the possibility the lost victim, the lost person who can prevent forced marriages is the register. They are the last one to see the victim. They are the last one to have the legal possibility to protect the victim and to end a possible forced marriages. They are the last one have a legal basis on this one to prevent the real forced marriages. And we dealt with that because we knew that for the registers didn't know how to act, and we didn't saw the registers themselves to act to protect the victims. They didn't know how to deal with it. They didn't know to see the forced marriages. They didn't have the sensitization towards. So we give them a toolkit, a really helpful toolkit, what questions to be asked. And if you don't have a doubt, okay, we have your marriages. But if you have a doubt, and maybe you don't know what to do with it, maybe you can postpone, and maybe you can then have an individual with the victim. And then at that point, you have to protect already the victim. You have to refer the victim. But if you have a real sign, a really big sign of forced marriages, then you have to legally not only postpone, but you have to ignore the marriage, you say, and you have to contact directly the public prosecutor. So this was a very useful toolkit to having the last opportunity, the last legal basis to prevent forced marriages, but also to protect the victim, because at that point we have to protect the victim. In Belgium, we have a very good legal base on how to deal with forced marriages. I think on legal basis, we are very good on how to deal with forced marriages. We have also a very good directive for the police and for the public prosecutors, how to deal with forced marriages. It is a directive on honor-based crimes, so-called honor-based crimes. We have a reference magistrate, we have a registered reference police in every system. But in the fact, it is very hard, still hard to train everyone. To have the multidisciplinary working on this issue, that for example, registered police and public prosecutors are working together with NGOs to have a multidisciplinary working process. We are still working on this one. We have also, we have to install now, we are working on it, to install, like in the Netherlands, like in the UK, really specialized NGOs who are trained to have care for these victims, and these people have to need to collaborate with a very warm and very outreach project with the police and the public prosecutors and everyone, because we haven't installed this one, and that we are dealing now. We want to have a specialized NGO care center for force managers as well. The greatest challenges for me is, if you're talking about force managers, it's still an issue, a taboo issue. It's still hard to find out, hard to reach the victims. The victims themselves are not speaking out. It's difficult to see the difference, the loyalty towards the community themselves, towards their family, and to seek help. And this is still an ongoing issue. Sensitizing on a culture-sensitive, non-victim blaming way, sensitizing everyone what is force managers about, sensitizing everyone that they can seek from help, that the stakeholders can address these issues, and seeing the force managers, seeing the sign of force managers and the difference between the force managers and the share marriages. Because the difference is, in a force managers, you have a victim. And as share marriages, you don't have a victim. And if you address a force manager as a share marriage, you are victim blaming. You're not protecting the victim. So sensitizing, training everyone, but also sensitizing the possible victims, the possible family to seek help, even families who are thinking about using force managers. Give them another possibility to deal with the problem they want to deal with. And they are going to use force managers to deal with the problem. Give them another opportunity. Open, non-victim blaming, non-blaming way, using the very good language to sensitize everyone, because there are victims there, but we don't see them. And this is still an ongoing process. My message for the future is that we see, as a society, we recognize the victim as soon as possible. We on every level, for example, at schools, on public prosecutors, with the police, we are talking about the issue on force managers. We are seeing the signs, and we, as soon as possible, do everything to protect the victim, but do not victim blaming. That we are talking about the victim, but as soon as possible.